In this lecture we'll be adding materials to our cyborg and we'll look briefly at render settings. Okay, so we've got our cyborg characters here and I'm going to work on the one I made previously. You should now have your own cyborg design that you can work on, and we want to add some color or materials to this. So I'll go across to the shading workspace, so the shading workspace up here. I could of course get rid of the windows down here, but they're not really in the way, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'll zoom in a bit on my object, and I'm actually in edit mode for this shape here, so I'll come out of edit mode and choose an object to color. Let's start with something like the arm over here. So mine's got a base material called Material 003. If yours hasn't, remember you'll have a new material option here. Just click on that new material. If I click on my drop down here, you can see that I've got 4 materials. They're all the same, but it's because I imported a character from a different scene. So you may only see one material here, or you might just see the new material button here. If so, just click on that and you'll get a base material. And obviously we can change the base color. Let's choose a sort of grey color and put the metal up. So it's this sort of metal robot-like object like this. And that already looks quite fun. So obviously these materials were all sharing material 3. And any changes I make here will affect the whole object. In fact, a darker metal looks even better, I think. I could bring the roughness down and make it more shiny, but I think I preferred it how it was. So somewhere about 0.3 I've got it at, so it's reasonably shiny, but not overly shiny. Now, if all your objects don't share that one material, have a quick think how you could link those materials. So the clue was obviously in the way I said it. We're linking the materials together, so if I select all of them, my active object is the one highlighted in yellowy orange, not the more reddy orange, and that's the one with material 3. I'll rename this actually to metal so it's not confusing, and to copy this object's material, the active object, onto the rest of the objects, we press Ctrl L and then link materials. Obviously they're already the same, but just in case yours weren't. So pause the video and make your whole object a metallic color. Okay, so what about this object down here? Let's zoom in on that. And the reason I'm choosing that is because it's got this sort of interesting indent. It's not particularly well done, as it sort of goes in up there and this bit seems to stick out in a weird way, but it just about works, so it will be fine for this demonstration. The reason I want one with an indent like this is because I want this indent to have a glow to it. I think that'd be really fun. So I want this object to have 2 materials, and we can do that with the material slots down here. So with this object selected, I can come down to the slots. It's got the metal slot at the moment, but I can add a slot here, and that creates a slot, but not a material just yet. I have to create a new material as well. So I'll create a new material, and this is going to be an emissive material, so I'll call this emission. I'll scroll down my principled BSDF just a touch. In fact, I'll make this smaller so you can see most of it. So I'm just cutting off the top. We've got the base color there down to the emission here, which is obviously going to be important. So I've got this new material and 2 material slots, metal and emission. So I can make an emissive material by changing the emission color. First we need to change the brightness to bring it right up, and maybe something that's reddy and ominous looking like this. But we're not seeing any impact on our object. That's because I haven't assigned any faces to slot 2. So I need to go into edit mode with tab and make sure I'm in face mode with 3. So I'm in face mode here. Select some faces like these inside faces here and here maybe. I could of course choose more, but that's fine for now. And you can see what I mean about this overlap here. It's a bit bad, but from a distance we won't really notice. We can improve upon our modeling skills later on. So let's zoom out, and with those faces selected, I'll come to my slots here and tick on the emission, which you can see the sort of slight red glow to it at the moment, and I can assign these faces to this emission material. So assign there, and suddenly they're nice and bright. Doesn't look great at the moment, but we can change the emission strength here and bring that up to maybe something like 20, and it's starting to look a bit more interesting. We can also change the base color. If I bring that to red as well, it starts going a bit pinky colored, but that's because we've got quite a high emission there. I might bring that down to 10 so it's not quite as pinky. So I'll talk about how we can make this look better in just a moment, but first pause the video and with one of your objects create a new material slot. In that slot create an emission material, and then go into edit mode and choose the faces of that object that you want to assign that emission material to. Pause the video and have a go at that. Okay, so before we make this look better, I'll just go to another object and do the same sort of thing. So let's scroll up a bit, and I think some red eyes would look good. So into object mode, select my head, into edit mode, There's a slight anomaly here, it's overlapping itself, and you can probably tell here that it's got a mirror modifier on. If I go to solid mode, you can see one half of the mirror, but it is overlapping in the middle. So if I select all and press G to grab in the X and move it outwards, that sorts out that overlap, and then it can stick together like this, and that's much better. And now when I scale in the X, it's stuck together and it's not overlapping. Not sure why that happened to my model, but I thought I'd show you that just in case that happens to you. And just to push the point, if we go to the mirror modifier, the clipping is on, so it should stick together down the middle. So first of all, we create a new material slot. So under the slots, new material up here. And I can actually come into here and select the faces at this point and go to my slots and assign them to slot 2. And let's go back to my material preview, and you can see nothing's actually happening, it's just giving it a white material. That's because slot 2 hasn't got a material yet. So with slot 2 selected, we can come up to here and choose a material to go into slot 2. So I'll click on the drop down, choose my emission, and it's got the red in there. Okay, let's zoom out just a touch and see how we can make this look a little bit better. So pause the video and add an emission material to different parts of your objects or different faces of your objects. One other thing that you might want to do, let's choose this arm for example here. So I'll go into object mode, choose the arm, zoom in on that and into edit mode. You might want to create some insets so you can add emission materials. So I can of course select some faces like this and do some sort of inset and then extrude inwards, and we've got an inset like that. Or you could create a loop cut. So around here with Control R, I'll double left click to set that, and then 3 to go to face mode, and I can select that face loop here, extrude it and scale it inwards. So we've got 2 lots of insets there. I can select both of these. So all my face loop around here is selected, and these 2 that are inset in here. Create a new slot for this particular object, so on the plus sign. We can assign that now, but it just turns white because there's no material in there. And in slot 2, we want to put that emission material, and there it is. So pause the video and create any extra insets you want to, and add some emission to those. Lastly, we want to think about how we can make this look good. Well, let's bring this down for the moment, and I think it would be better if this character was standing on a floor, so Shift A to add. Oh, now I've only got the mesh menu here. Have a think what that means. Well, that means that I'm in edit mode for this object. Remember, when you're adding new objects, tab back into object mode. So Shift A to add, mesh and plane, and it's over where my 3D cursor is. Let's just scale this up, and they both got a floor there. I'll add a new material to this, and we'll make this a dark, shiny floor. Looks a little bit odd at the moment, but we're going to make it look much better in just a second. So pause the video and quickly add in a floor. So the last thing to make this look really great is to come to our render properties over here. Now material preview mode uses the engine Eevee, the render engine Eevee here. So things I change here like ambient occlusion, which fills in these crevices with a sort of dark shadow, that will work in both material preview mode and in rendered mode here as well. But remember, rendered mode is without the HDRI in the background and uses the lights from the scene. And a few videos ago, let's just minimize this and the cyborg and the other ones in my scene. We've got camera and light there that I put into a new collection. If I make that visible, you can see the lights in our scene now. And we just got one there. But this ambient occlusion effect, as you saw there, with the crevices, work in both material preview mode and rendered mode when we're using the render engine Eevee. Slightly different when we're using cycles. So if I change the render engine to cycles, you can see a very different result there. Cycles is a more realistic render engine, and I'll talk more about render engines later on in the course, but for now we'll stick to Eevee because it's much simpler and renders faster. So ambient occlusion is one thing to help your scenes look a bit better. It puts these shadows in the crevices, which looks quite nice, and helps it to look a little bit more realistic. I'll just deselect the floor so the yellow line doesn't get in the way. Next, let's try bloom. When I click on that, we've got this glow to our lights, and it's looking pretty cool now. The last one on the list is screen space reflections. That enables the reflections. They're quite blurry because it's a real-time render, so they're not realistic reflections. They still look quite good. So pause the video and have a go at putting in ambient occlusion, bloom and screen space reflections in the render settings tab. Do make sure you're in rendered mode, as that will make a big difference. So that's what it looks like in rendered view. In material preview mode, you get this HDRI in the background that lights our scene and obviously gives us this reflection as well, but it doesn't look quite as good. I prefer rendered view where we use our own lighting. And we could even change the color of this light up here. Oh, I must have changed that to deselected at some point. So let's get our selection tool up and enable selection. There we go. Select my light, and now I could move that around for some different visual effects, maybe some uplighting, or come from this angle over here, maybe even change the color of the light under the lighting properties here. You can have lots of fun with this sort of thing. Maybe some sort of bluey green sci-fi light like this. Oh yes. I'm going to hide my Cyborg 2 for the moment because I haven't textured that. So let's hide that. Oh, now my plane was in the Cyborg 2 collection. So let's view that collection again. Choose my plane, M to move to new collection, and I think that would go well in the camera and light, so it's all part of my scene. Now I can hide Cyborg 2 and just have my main Cyborg there. And to render out the scene, let's go to camera view with 0 on my numpad. That takes us to camera view. If I press N to get my tools and go to view, I can also lock the camera to view just there and move my camera into position so I can think about what it's going to look like when I render. So move it to somewhere like this, using the same keyboard commands as you would moving your viewport. So pause the video and take a moment to get your camera into position. Lastly, the background's all grey. I'm going to change that to black. And in order to change the background, we come down to here where it says Object, we change that to World. I'll press the Home key to frame all. There's just one node, the background node, into the output. We can bring the strength down to 0, and that changes it to black, or we can actually change the colour to black as well. Maybe needs just a tiny bit of strength there, so the character stands out just a touch. Now to render our scene, to create the still image, we press F12, and unfortunately I've got all my characters appearing. So I'll close that down. The reason for that is they're hidden in the scene, as you can see there, but not in the render. So I need to change all these to hide in the render as well as the scene. Just minimize these two. And all these ones. Now we've just got the camera and light and our Cyborg. Oh, that needs to be in the render. And I think we're there. F12 once again, and there's our Cyborg. Actually, I think it needs one more light, so I'll close this down. I'll come out of camera view with 0 on my numpad and press N to get rid of this toolbar. And let's just find that light, which I think is just there. A bit tricky to see, but I think I want to duplicate that. Shift D to the other side and maybe bring it down just to separate my Cyborg from the background. And in fact, I'm going to use 3-point lighting, so Shift D, move that to the front as well. And I think that's just enough. There we go. I'm in camera view once again, and it's a bit easier to see. I'll talk much more about lighting in a later episode, but F12, and there's our Cyborg looking very menacing. Okay, so your challenge then is to complete your Cyborg model with some emissions, put them on a floor, duplicate your lights. I think 2 lights is working reasonably well here, and turn the background to a much darker color, and share your results on the community. And that concludes this lecture.